Is that right? We gotta know. You're getting a skirmish here. How many you got? Nobody has that in their notes?
128 men.
128 men. That is
I
correct.
was right. I was pretty close.
So, 128 men. Right here. Okay. Now, during the initial charge, before the skirmish line was formed, Privates George Smith and Henry Turley lost control of their horses. They're on your ID sheet. During the initial charge towards the Indian village, before they formed the skirmish line, Privates George Smith and Henry Turley lost control of their horses. Does that mean they fell off them?
No.
Not necessarily. And what did their horses do when they lost control? They ran right into the Indian village where they were promptly killed and thus become the first two casualties of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. I can't tell you whether the horses got killed or not, but they sure as hell did. Okay? So, during the initial charge towards the Indian village, Privates George Smith and Henry Turley lost control of their horses. This resulted in the two soldiers riding their horses directly into the camp and their immediate deaths. Actually, Smith was the first casualty. He was the first one killed. Okay? After sharp fighting at the skirmish line for about 15 minutes, Reno's forces were getting incredible pressure from their left flank. Where would that be?
The place that JT was supposed to be buried?
Where's my red marker? So no. Left flank of the skirmish line, not that. So where are they getting a lot of pressure from?
Right there.
Right here. Okay? So after sharp fighting for approximately 15 minutes, Reno's forces are receiving severe pressure from their left flank from Chief Gall and his warriors. So they're getting harder this way than they are this way. Okay? It's going to make a point here in a minute. So after 15 minutes of fighting, just 15 minutes of fighting, Chief Gall and his warriors are putting tremendous pressure on Reno's left flank of his skirmish line. So what does he do?
Rotate his line.
He does. He orders an oblique 45-degree turn. So what is the line looking like now?
Facing the...
It's looking like this, right? Am I correct?
Yeah.
And what company is here?
A.
What company is here?
M.
What company is here?
G.
Okay. Who's protecting Reno's right flank?
Custer.
No. He's up on the hill up here. I'm talking right here.
Is he just watching?
He is. And I'll tell you about that. But
Why?
he's seeing a different thing, and you'll see. It'll make sense. Well, Company G had the responsibility of protecting Reno's command on the right flank. What the Indians did is they set a fire in this area here. Behind Company G, set a fire. So not only were they fighting pressure of Indian soldiers, Indian warriors, they were also getting hit with a fire. And that hindered their position. And Company G was under the command of Lieutenant Donald McIntosh, who we'll talk about more detail later. So as they make the 45-degree oblique turn, Company G is responsible to protect the right flank, and Sioux and Cheyenne warriors have set a fire in that area to hinder G Company and also continue their assault.
Is that going to push the line more then?
Well, it's going to force them to move from there. Now, as this fire is taking part, and Company G is trying to put it out and fight and keep themselves out of big trouble, Companies A, M, and A are getting pushed closer and closer to what?
The river.
and they're no longer in an established skirmish line. They're all over the damn place. And they're getting pushed farther and farther towards the river. Can you picture this in your mind? Okay? Closer and closer to the river. Well, Reno tried to gather all of his men, including G. He was having some difficulty there. And Reno stopped at a tree, a lone tree. And you'll see it. It's just out in the middle of nowhere. There's one big tree. And Reno stopped at that tree.
Didn't have mental break.
And guess who's standing next to him? Bloody Knife. And Reno is asking advice and opinion from Bloody Knife on what they should do because he's getting assaulted big time here. He's only got 128 men. Okay? So, Major Reno stopped with a group of men at the lone tree and he asked advice from opinion from Scout Bloody Knife on what to do. They stood next to each other at the tree. Firing, they're not stopping firing. Are they still being assaulted and firing back? Well, as Reno is pretty close, probably from here to Wade, from Bloody Knife. Bloody Knife gets hit right in the head, and blood and brains splatter all over Reno's face. Boom! And Bloody Knife falls to his death, and there's Reno sitting there in a panic with blood and brains. What? He got shot. Yep, got shot in the head, killed him instantly, and blood and brain matter all over Reno's face. If you can picture that. Well, Reno panics, and he orders his command to mount and dismount 3 times. As soon as he gets hit in the face, he goes, "Mount!" All of his soldiers get on their horses, ready to go. Dismount. Mount. Dismount. Mount. Dismount. He was that panicked that he ordered the mount and dismount 3 times after he was hit in the face with Bloody Knife's blood and brains. He panicked. Okay? Well, then he got confused and they told his men to mount and follow him on a charge, which was actually a retreat back across the river to the high ground up here, which was pretty smart, actually. Okay, and I'm going to move the river. I got a little off base here. The river's going to go more like this. But anyway, he orders his men to mount and charge, although it was a retreat, back to the higher ground. So again, I'll read this to you again. Major Reno stopped with men at a lone tree approximately halfway between the second line and the river. He was asking advice and opinion from Scout Bloody Knife as both men stood near the tree. Suddenly, Bloody Knife was shot in the head and his brains and blood splattered all over Reno's face. Reno panicked, ordered the command to mount and dismount 3 different times. Finally, he asked his men to mount and follow him on a charge, which turned out really to be a retreat, back across the river to higher ground, which they did. Who's still right here fighting like crazy? Company G and Donald McIntosh. Okay, they haven't been in this discussion here, have they? So as those men start to retreat back over the bluff, these guys are still trying to hold ground there. Okay? Well, finally they can't hold their position anymore, so they join A and M and head back across the river in haste to the higher ground. Well, during that attempt to get past the river and up, McIntosh was killed. And we'll talk more about what happened to him later. But McIntosh, Lieutenant Donald McIntosh, is killed during that attempt to get back. And basically the remainder of the retreat was just mass confusion and chaos. Reno's men fought furiously to retreat back across the Little Bighorn River at all costs and get on top. And it was just unbelievable. There's a famous painting of a guy wounded in the Little Bighorn River. And you can see a man coming by, and he took his foot out of his stirrup, and the soldier grabbed the stirrup, and the man was, taking him out as he held onto the stirrup out over the bluffs, and he was shot and killed. It's a pretty good story, but there's a real famous painting of that somebody painted. So you can imagine, put in your mind, just mass confusion from the initial skirmish line to when they started getting heat, and the oblique turn, it was all basically a free-for-all back across the river to the bluffs. Some are going to make it, and some are not, okay, which we'll talk about. That is the Valley fight. Now, here's some quotes I want you to hear. Charles Barnum, remember him?
Write these down.
No, don't write these down, just listen. Charles Barnum, remember him? He was one of the scouts, chief of scouts that was on the crow's nest. He was with Reno. This is what he was later quoted as saying. Now, don't put your stuff away because we're not done. I'm just going to give you some quotes. Okay, this is what he said. When we came out of the woods, there were a great many Indians scampering along with their rifles across the saddle, working their Winchesters on the column. In other words, he said when we came out of the woods, because this is a wooded area in this place here, and you'll kind of see it when you go there, and he said when we came out of the woods, between the woods and the river was an open area that was dangerous to get through. And he said when we came out of the woods, there were a great many Indians scampering along with their rifles across the saddle, working their Winchesters on the column. Fred Gerard, remember Fred Gerard, the interpreter? He was with that crew, okay? The Indians picked off the troops at will. It was a rout. Major Reno, once on top of the higher ground, said, I have lost half of my men. Okay? Now, during this exchange, 40 of the 128 men were killed and 13 were wounded. So 53 out of 128 were either killed or wounded. So that didn't leave him with a great force up on top, did it? Okay? You can do the math. The river of the Little Bighorn actually flowed in red as the soldiers tried to cross. Okay? There was red blood flowing in the Little Bighorn River as they tried to get across. Okay? Now, once they retreated over to the higher ground, what did the Native Americans do? Did they continue up the bluff and try to destroy them? No. What did they do? They went and searched for
Survivors?
Ammo.
who do they know is who do the Indians know is on top there? Custer. They went to pursue Custer. Now, Custer's story is a different one, and that's going to be in part 2. Okay, so we're going to basically have 3 little quizzes here, okay? So, it was 4:00 p.m. in the afternoon when the dust settled and Reno and his men were on top of the bluff. Who's going to come join him soon? Benteen, the pack train, and his men. Okay? Then they're going to have to make a decision on whether they're going to support Custer and go to where Custer is not. You don't know where Custer is. Last thing you heard about Custer is on top of the hill. I'll just give you a preview. What Custer did is he watched Reno engage the Indians. And as soon as he saw him engaged, did he sit there and watch the whole thing? No. He advanced along the bluffs, and the idea was to hit the Indian village. Custer's idea of Custer, what he's going to do is he thinks Reno is going to wipe these people out, and Custer's going to come right here, and he's going to try to get the Indian village this way. So they were looking at kind of a this way, that way surrounding. What they didn't know was how big this village was. And Custer just watched Reno engage. And once he engaged, he began to advance along the bluff. So did Custer know that Reno was skedaddling? No. That's the key thing you need to know. So picture it. It's 4:00 in the afternoon, June 25th, 1876. Now, when we get back and lecture tomorrow or whatever, we're going to talk about Donald. We're going to talk about some key personalities that were killed during the Reno charge, including Donald McIntosh, including Charlie Reynolds. You've heard of Charlie Reynolds, right? We're going to talk about a guy named Isaiah Dorman. We're going to talk about Bloody Knife. And then we're going to talk about a very special horse that was killed during the Reno charge. It's got a great story to it. What's that? Yeah, we're going to tell you a little bit about him. McIntosh is dead too. We're going to tell you some things about these personalities that were killed. Okay? Then we're going to have a quiz, then we'll move on to Custer.